Good morning. And if you've watched any of my other early morning videos, you may suspect that this is just not a regular, it's not a regular day. There's actually sunshine out here in Sweden, and it does get sunny later in the day. Anywho, I thought I was going to talk about something that I kind of sparked an interesting thought in me. I was reading an article the other day where a discussion arose for, I'm not going to mention any names now, but basically the blog post was about this front-end developer. She's a fairly well-established person in the community. She was talking about a question that she had received when she was part of a panel, where the question was, would you, or rather, is there a value in knowing only HTML and CSS? And she rephrased the question in a way where she said, well, that's the core, if you think about it, the core of that question is more actually, can you survive as a front-end developer without JavaScript? Is there a value in not knowing, can you provide value without JavaScript? And the blog post then moves on to saying that she thinks that, basically she asked the audience, that would you hire a person who doesn't know JavaScript? And nobody raised their hands or anything, because nobody would. And she said that she was kind of sad that that was the case, because, her argument basically was that there are still you can still provide value. Like, JavaScript is an important part, but the fundamentals of writing good semantic HTML and good CSS is still very much relevant. And I was pondering this, and although I agree with the sentiment that there is absolutely such a thing as that having a lot of value, I think it's a matter of being pragmatic, because it actually expands into something which I think is a little bit of it's once again a little bit of a disease. Like, there is in the IT world it's not a sickness, but it is because it's so very, very large. Like, the concept of programming and all this stuff is massive, my friends. It is so humongously large. And frankly, we live in a time where basically the people who are hiring you, depending on who it is, they want you to be able to do more and more and more. And frankly, sometimes it's almost impossible. Like, you will see companies who have, don't even bother going to these companies. Don't even give them your time, because there are companies who will ask you to be able to do absolutely fucking everything. There's the resume requirements that they're looking for is I remember this. It sticks with me to this day. You needed to have roughly, I think it was 10 years of being a civil engineer, work related, 10 years of work experience, and then at least 5 years as a Java developer. And like I said immediately, that's like having two lives. That's like two different people for one position in one person. You're never ever going to find somebody who's going to fit that description. Or maybe you will. Maybe there are super people out there who live that type of life. I don't know. But onto the core of my core thing here. In the context of CSS and HTML and JavaScript, the thing is that there are things that are there is no, in response to her argument, I want to say that there are absolutely things that I think is valuable in of themselves. I mean, if you're a front-end developer, you shouldn't have to be an expert in database query optimization, for example, because that's a highly specialized, highly technical thing, which is not that relevant to your ability to produce value, because that's what it's about. And the CSS and HTML, they're just a part of the puzzle. It's like being a painter and only being able to produce paintings that use purple and orange and none of the other colors. It's like you are not rounded enough. I am saying that if you are the type of person who you're really good at CSS and HTML but you don't know JavaScript, then frankly in today's world, although you can absolutely produce value and maybe you're even a master, it doesn't matter how much of a master you are, because you are lacking in that one extra thing you need in order to produce value, because that's what it's about. It's not about being the best at one very specific little thing, because nobody is going to because you can't produce the needed results. That's the problem. The needed results is that you need to be able to produce web pages. You don't have to be a super guru of CSS, or rather it's actually worse. I mean, if you're a guru of CSS but you can't write HTML or JavaScript, once again it's like having people with a disability facing off against people without disabilities. Although they're amazing athletes and they're really good and like they're extremely passionate and good at what they do, they're lacking something that allows them to compete on the same level as these other athletes. And it's the same thing here. So what I kind of want to say is that the term web designer, like, this is a loose term, but to me the term web designer, it was relevant maybe 5 or 10 more years ago, actually, when the web was still very young, before JavaScript more or less took over as the primary requirement to do effective web development work. It's and a web designer would in essence be a person who mostly spent their time working, as I'm saying, like with HTML and CSS and so forth, and JavaScript didn't have much in terms of relevancy. But those times are more or less gone. The bar has been raised. And today it's actually more useful for you to be well-rounded in all of these three concepts than being a master of one single concept. And to respond to this blog post, I actually think that this is not... I think that the sentiment that you shouldn't have, like, that you can still produce value even though you only know a few things, or you're really good at a few select pieces of technology, it is absolutely true. But you have to weigh that against the value, because remember, if you're hiring somebody, you're going to have to pay them a certain amount of money. And if you're going to pay them to do something, it's vital that they can do all the things that you need them to do. And frankly, if you only have money enough to spend, like, ask yourself, put yourself in the manager's or the company owner's position. If you're going to hire somebody who's going to produce value for your company, are you like, do you want to hire somebody who is a master of one thing, but you need to hire one more person? Like, you basically had to hire two people, one who knows JavaScript and CSS and HTML, and then that other person who can do the JavaScript as well, because the first person can't do that. Or are you going to hire a single individual that can produce the desired results, because that person knows all of the necessary stuff? And that's kind of where I'm coming from here. Maybe if you have endless amounts of resources, or the person who's good at CSS and HTML is so massively amazing at what they do that the lack of knowing JavaScript weighs up weighs up for that. And that is absolutely feasible, but I don't think that's the world we live in. So to summarize my little rant here, I would say that there are things that are reasonable to be expected that you know, and to me, CSS, HTML and JavaScript, these are not impossible things. I even actually ask myself, what type of web maybe the person who is, because to me the core of the question is, okay, do you need to know JavaScript to do web development work? Well, no, not technically, but if you're asking that question, maybe you should be a designer. Maybe that's more your suit, because because CSS and HTML are pure, there's no logic at all. It has nothing to do with programming at all. And like, even though we like to call HTML code and CSS code, it's not code. It has nothing to do with coding. There's nothing like it. There's no logic whatsoever. So maybe that's my answer. Like, if you feel the need to ask that question, if you can, because to me it sounds more like I want to avoid learning JavaScript, then maybe you're in the wrong profession. Because in my opinion, the people who get far in this industry are the type of people who are more concerned about producing, like, they want to produce value, they want to make good user experiences, and they will learn and adopt new tools as needed to produce that value to their users.